Okay, this is the Unit 1 Pre-Cal video. Again, if you have any questions on anything, make sure you use the Remind 101 app to get a hold of me if you're one of my students. Okay, so on the first questions, it's all about factoring and solving. So on the first one, you just have to factor out the 2 because each of them have a greatest common factor of 2. So if you do that, you end up with 2. And then if I divide that whole thing by 2, this is what I'm left with. And then you would just factor from there. So once you factor from here, you'll get your answers, okay? So here I'm looking for two numbers that I'll multiply to get negative 54 and add to get 3, or combine to get 3. So it's going to look like that. And then my answer here would be x equals negative 9 and x equals 6. Now on this one over here, again, you have that negative, y'all. You have to factor out negatives. So if I factor out the negative here, that's going to make all the other signs become the opposite. And then again, I factor, and then I find out what x equals. Now, on this one here, I have to multiply these two first, and that gives me negative 20. And then I'm looking for one that I'll combine to get negative 1, so negative 5 and 4. Okay, and then I have to use the grouping here or the box. So that gives me 5x squared minus 5x plus 4x plus 4. Okay, so all I did is I took this one and this one. Oh, I'm sorry, that should be a negative 4. Okay, because of that negative. And then this here is what makes the negative 1 there. Okay, and then I'm just going to start grouping. So group, 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 group. Here I can pull out a 5x, and that leaves me with x minus 1. Here I can pull out a 4, and again I'm left with x minus 1. So my factors are x minus 1. Okay, and then it's also 5x plus 4 because of here and here. All right, so that means x equals 1 and x equals negative 4/5. All right, on the next one, I'm only going to do one of these. The main idea with these is that, first of all, you have to factor out the negative and then any other number, and then you have to set it equal to 0. So for this one here, I'll do this one. I'm going to cross these out. I'm not going to do those. I'm looking for 0 profit, so I want the equation to equal 0. So instead of p of x, I'm going to put 0 equals negative 2x squared plus 16x minus 40. Okay? Now, I notice I can factor out a negative 2. So I'm going to factor out that negative 2. And that leaves me with x squared minus 8x. Now, I just remembered something. This actually needs to be a plus sign up here for it to work. So put a plus sign there. And then that means I'm going to factor out a negative 20. All right, so I'm looking for what two numbers will multiply to get negative 20 and combine to get negative 8. So I know that's going to be negative 10 and 2. So my factors are negative 2, and then I still have the x minus 10 and x plus 2. Okay, well my solutions here are x equals 10 and x equals negative 2. Well, I'm trying to figure out the number of products. Well, you can't sell a negative amount of products, so the only answer would have to be 10. All right, on these down here, you're looking for the domain. So I'm trying to figure out what x values it can't be or can be. All right, so for my domain here, I know that I can't divide by 0. So when I do this, I know that this cannot equal 0. So if I work this problem out, x will equal, x can't be 4. Okay, so the way that I write that is I know this is a rational function, so it's going to start at negative infinity and go to 4. It's going to pick up on the other side of the asymptote at 4 and then head on to infinity. All right, on this one here, again, you can't take the square root of a negative number and get a real solution. So I know that underneath this radical, I have to have x plus 8. It has to be greater than or equal to 0. So if I do that, I know that x has to be greater than or equal to negative 8. Another way to write that is I know that it has to go from negative 8 all the way to infinity. All those are okay. Alright, down here I'm trying to decide if it's an even or odd function. So remember, if it's an even function, when I substitute in the negative x, it's going to be the same. If it's odd, everything becomes the opposite. And then if neither of those things happen, that's when you have the neither. So this is when you substitute in that negative x. So for instance here, if I substitute in negative x here, well, the absolute value of any number is going to be a positive. So this one stayed the same as this one, so it's even. Alright, these square root functions are going to be neither, because again, they're not going to be symmetrical along the y-axis. Okay, they'll never be symmetrical along the y-axis. Now this one, if I substitute it in, I'm going to substitute in that negative x. That becomes a positive, so I still have 3x squared. I'm going to just erase that. And then this is also a plus x. So on this one, this is going to be a neither, because this stayed the same, but this one flipped. So this is also a neither. All right. On this side here, these are those nested functions. So for this one, okay. So for this one here, this is my f of x. And this one here is my g of x. Alright, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start with the 8x minus 3, because that's what I'm starting with here, starting with the f, so I have the 8. And then I'm going to substitute in the g of x, and then minus 3. So if I work this one out, that gives me 16x plus 48 minus 3, and that gives me 16x plus 45. Alright, this one here, I'm starting with the g, so I got a 2. This time I'm substituting in the f for it. And again, I'm going to finish it off with the plus 6. And then simplify it. Alright, on the next one here, I'll do this one here. So on this one here, again, I have my f of x. I have my g of x. I start off with the g here, and I'm putting the f inside of it. So if I start off with the g here, I have an x squared. So I have to substitute that whole thing into it, and then minus 5. Now, I actually need to FOIL this out, multiply it out, so 6x plus 4 times itself, and then minus 5. Alright, so if I multiply this out, this gives me 36x squared plus 24x plus 24x plus 16 minus 5. Alright, so I'm going to simplify that now, and that gives me 36x squared plus 48x plus 11. Alright, we've done a couple of these in the notes and such. I'm going to hold off on doing that one. If you have questions about it, please let me know. Alright, down here we're talking about intervals. The most important thing with the intervals, y'all, is make sure you're looking at the x values. Okay, so when I'm looking at the intervals, I should only be focused on these values. That is it. Okay, so on this one is increasing. It's increasing from negative infinity. Okay, so on this one, if it's increasing from negative infinity, this will be negative infinity, and then it increases all the way to right here, which is going to be at negative 3. Now remember, on the test you're going to see brackets, but the parentheses are the exact same thing, okay? for this. Now, you're going to see it taught two different ways. I taught you parentheses, but don't get fooled by the brackets. All right, now I also see it increasing right here. So it's increasing here also from 1 all the way to right here. So that's 1 to 4. Okay, so that's my increasing. So this was an increase, and this was an increase. All right, now, as far as decreasing goes, it's decreasing right here. So that's from -3 all the way to 1. And that's the only place I see it decreasing. And then I do see a constant. The constant's right here. And that's heading towards infinity. So the constant there is going to be at 4 all the way to infinity. All right, let's flip it over. Okay, your local min and max. So remember, this right here, this will be your local max, and it's a y value. So when you're talking about these, make sure you understand it's a y value. So the highest this one goes is there's a local max at y equals 10. There's a local min at y equals -10. Now, for my domain and range on this, this thing does go forever left and right and forever up and down. And then they ask, is this function even or odd? Well, if you take a point, so for instance, this point here is -2, 10. And you take this point here, it's at 2, -10. You want to notice that they flipped, okay? So since they flipped, this is an even function. All right, as far as the discontinuity goes, oh, that is a dashed line. I didn't notice that earlier. Okay, this is a dashed line. In class, I may not have noticed that, but that is a dashed line. So at x equals 3, that is an infinite. I guess I just thought it was a grid line during class. At x equals -2, that's a removable. At x equals 5, it's another removable. And then at x equals 0, it's a jump. Again, I think of a little frog. Jump, jump, jump. All right, on these here, they want you to graph that function. Now, what I notice is I know that this is shaped like this. So this is one of those square root functions that's going to look something like that, okay? And I also know it moved 5 to the left. So I'm going to put a point 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, I'm going to go 5 to the left, and I'm going to go up 1, over 1. And this kind of gives me an idea of what this is going to look like. Okay, now all inverses reflect over the line y equals x. So I just chose the numbers. I chose -5, 0. Which means that my inverse will have 0, -5. I also chose the point -4, 1, which means my inverse will have 1, -4. So I'm going to go over to 1. Sorry, I'm going to start with that one. So I'm going to go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, so there's that. And I'm going to do 1, -4. There's that. And then that should be enough to kind of create the curve there. So I'm just going to make sure I curve it up. And it should look something like that. Now, as far as writing the inverse, remember f of x is the same as y. So I have y equals absolute value of x plus 5. You switch them, so make sure you switch them. To get rid of that radical, I'm going to square it. Whatever I do on one side, do the other. So now I have x squared equals y plus 5 minus 5 minus 5. Y equals x squared minus 5. And then that's the inverse. Now, this is a parabola, but remember, I have to limit my domain. So because of that, I really only want that side of the parabola. Okay, this one's just writing an equation, so it should look something like this. All right, because it's a quadratic. So So if it's shifted 4 units to the left, that's going to look like a +4. If it's 2 units down, that's a -2. It's reflected across the x-axis, so that's the negative. All right, on the back, I'm not going to do the piecewise. If y'all have questions about that, let me know. I am going to graph this one. All right, so again, this is going to be shaped like this because it's an absolute value. I know that the vertex moved left 4, so 1, 2, 3, 4 from 0. I also know this is going to be opening downward because it's a negative, and this is how I can find my other points. So because of that, it's like a rise and a run. I'm going to go down 2 over 1, and down 2 over 1 on the other side, and my graph will look something like that. Okay, now this one, I know that it's going to look something like that. I know it went down 4 from 0, so right here would be my vertex. And then, because there's a 1 here, for this one part of the graph, I can go up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1. Oops, I did not go up 1 over 1. I could also solve this if I wanted to, or create like a table of values. So if you're having trouble with the graphing, think about, putting in a table of values there. So, if I wanted to, I know there's going to be a point at 0, -4. Okay, I know I put a point at, where's that? -1. -1, -3, and I put another point at 1, 3. But if I wanted to, I could get another point. So 2 squared is 4 minus 4 is 0, so I'm going to have a point at 2. And then remember, it's kind of reflected over this because it's still an even function. So, and then just kind of graph it. All right, on this one here, you're writing the equation. So since I'm writing the equation here, I know it's absolute value. So it's going to look something like this. Okay, this one, if I go up 2 over 1, it's 2 over 1, so it's a stretch. So I'm going to put a 2 here. It's also opening upward, so I don't need to worry about the reflection. The vertex moved over 3 and then down 2. So 3 to the right and down 2. Okay, like I said, I'm not going to do the piecewise. If you have questions about that, let me know. All right, on this one here, you're solving for R. So I'm going to want to move everything over. So I'm going to divide that whole thing, but I'm actually going to do it piece by piece. So I'm going to do the pi. Okay, so that gives me V over pi equals 4/3 R cubed. Now, I need to multiply by the reciprocal here. Okay, so that gives me 3/4. And then I could just do V over pi. And then I'm going to do the cube root of it. So R equals the cube root of 3V over 4 pi. All right, on this one here, make sure you solve for L. Oh, handwriting. It is a Friday. Solve for L. I didn't put that on there. So my first step would have to be subtract by the t. So y minus t equals 1/4 BL. Now if you don't like having to deal with all that at once, you can do it piece by piece, so divide by the b. And I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal. Sorry, I forgot to put that b there. Okay, now multiply by the reciprocal, multiply by the reciprocal. So that gives me 4 equals L. Oops, y'all can't see that last part. Okay, if y'all have any questions, please let me know. Even if it's something from the notes, just please talk to me, let me know, and I'm here to help you. All right, hope this helps.